Welcome to Korean Context, a behind-the-scenes conversation with the scholars, artists and opinion makers that bridge our two worlds. My name's Chad Carroll and I'll be your host today. In this episode, I got the opportunity to speak to Miss Jie-Ae Sohn, the current president of Arirang, Korea's first English-language international broadcaster. Ms. Sohn, former CNN head correspondent for South Korea, spoke to us about modern Korean culture, her previous journalistic experience, elections, North Korea, the role of women, and much more. I started by asking Ms. Sohn to describe what exactly Arirang does.
Well, Arirang TV and radio is Korea's only English language network that sends out news, information, culture, there are various types of dramas that send out all around the world. We go into 188 countries. About 970,000 households are able to view or listen to Arirang. We've been around for about 15 years. So we've been sending news and content about Korea around the world for quite some time.
Okay, great. Now, you obviously reach a lot of Korean Americans, I would imagine. How big an audience are they, roughly?
Well, Korean Americans in the U.S., they are a big group. There are several generations. Actually, in the United States, we were the first Korean station to get into the United States, and that was for the first generation of Koreans. But the first generation of Koreans prefer a sort of a Korean language broadcast. So while they welcome the fact that they could actually see a Korean broadcaster in the United States, I think they prefer a more Korean type of channel. Because we're all English, what we are finding is that we're being very effective in the 1.5 or the second generation of Korean Americans who have a Korean heritage but find that their first language preference is now English. So we are finding that they are awakened to their roots in Korea through Arirang TV and radio.
Are these Korean Americans merely recipients of your broadcasts, or are they now shaping and influencing the programming as well? I mean, for example, this expat community sending media to you that's included now?
Yes, I mean, they are a main audience for Arirang TV and radio, but we also have programming that actually originates out of the United States, out of LA at the moment, that actually features a talk show with a host in LA that deals with Korean Americans in the United States. So that is the beginning. I think I emphasize the beginning. As that audience and as we get more feedback from the Korean American audience, I expect that we will be able to expand that coverage of getting the opinions and getting what is going on among the Korean American audience.
Just talking about K-culture and K-pop, I recently read that you said that K-culture, which goes beyond K-pop, accounts for a huge part of South Korea's national branding. But what exactly characterizes K-culture for you?
Well, K-culture is really a very wide concept. K-pop really is pop culture, and many people consider it the girls' generation, the Super Junior. It's the young Korean pop singers and sort of what the culture that surrounds them. They are wonderful. They are a dynamic part of Korea. But when you look at Korea overall, the culture that comes out of Korea comes from thousands of years of history. The musical background of Korea expands, and the excellence of Korean music expands into all types, not just popular music. We have rock and roll, we have Korean traditional music, we have classical Western music. In all aspects of these musical areas, Korean young people, old people, have made deep inroads. So we want to really use that Korean popular culture only as a first step into really discovering the real richness of Korea. And this is why we're taking Korean pop and K-pop and say, okay, now that you love K-pop, find what this rich K-pop comes from, and look at us and find and discover other aspects of Korea, and that's where K-culture comes in.
In terms of the culture, is this something that, big Korean firms want to be involved with? Because I read recently that you'd said still many big Korean firms don't have their ads running on Arirang. Perhaps this has changed since you said that, but if not, I'd be interested to hear your take as to why that might be the case.
Well, it has actually changed a bit since I last said that, I think, because we have had a number of big Korean companies join us as sponsors, commercial sponsors, and they've actually been happy to do so. I think it is because there is a growing realization among Korean corporate community that this is to the benefit of the Korean companies, that this is very much a positive image of Korea, that Korea as an overall is benefiting from this kind of cultural enhancement and cultural understanding around the world. And it is to that corporation's benefit to be a part of that. So I think there is a growing realization. I think it may not quite have reached a point where I'd like it to be yet, but we're getting there.
Another thing I'd read you mentioned, which I sympathise with a lot, having worked in this area for a while now, is that North Korea is obviously a big issue outside of Korea. And I saw that you said Americans didn't know much about Korea. When they thought of Korea, the first thing that came to mind was North Korea. And when North Korea was quiet, we didn't have much to write about. How do you hope to sort of change this media environment? Because it is difficult with so many people thinking of North Korea, nuclear weapons, but of course there's so much more flavour and colour there.
I think that is sort of the essence of news, where you try to go towards the quirky and not normal. And we all know that whatever North Korea is, it's not normal from our standards. So, the attention focus naturally gets to North Korea quite often. But when you look at the real importance of things in terms of really, making a difference in the global community, I think Korea has a lot to offer in terms of not just politics, but we have such a diverse area. Politics, of course, the economy, of course. Korea's work in environmental areas are really top notch. We have IT, of course, and of course we have the Korean popular culture, and now Korean culture in all aspects as well. So there is a very multifaceted side of Korea that can be offered. I think it's always a challenge for people like me and you to be able to convince people that Korea has and bears such watching. But I think Korea step by step is getting there. I think there is a lot more interest about Korea today than there was a year or so ago. And I think that's what, as you mentioned before, Korean corporations are also keen on. They've noticed that Korea has found a different recognition around the world. And, if they find that it is to their benefit to be associated with Korea, I think Korea is moving in the right direction. All we need to do is really give it more power and really sort of, continue the efforts to really make sure that people understand Korea as we understand Korea.
Yes, and I imagine that that's probably part of your goal as president in Arirang. What would you say your sort of main objectives are in the next few years with Arirang and sort of presenting Korean culture to overseas communities?
I think this is what the beauty of my job here is, that I can do all of those things that I've actually only thought about doing in my past lives and past professions. I can really put what I think is the best of Korea onto a channel, onto something that people can look at, people can enjoy. So that is sort of my objective for the how many years that I should be here. that to make everything that you can see on Arirang be a real reflection of how dynamic and how a wonderful country this is in terms of not just culture, in terms of news, in terms of the people. I mean, we put a lot of new programs that have sort of like talk show formats, and I think that's because we find that the best ambassadors of Korea around the world are its people. Korean people are active, they are smart, they are top notch, they are creative, young, old, whichever, in whichever sector. So we're trying to put a lot of that onto our air so that we can really give a full picture of Korea.
Many networks like BBC, France 24, sometimes perhaps ignorant people, they often like to represent these networks as nothing more than national propaganda. Are there any techniques and strategies that you're employing at Arirang to, evidence the fact that you're not obviously just a propaganda arm for the Korean government?
Well, we have the advantage, I think, in a way, in that we actually don't focus just on news, but we actually have a format which includes different types of broadcasting. We're almost like the U.S. networks, the ABC or NBC, where there, of course, news has a main role, but it also has entertainment and culture and news programs and talk shows and all types of programs. So the advantage we have is that we have a multi-different channel way of presenting Korea. And entertainment, culture, while we do it, we do put the best of it on air, it's not really considered propaganda. The only side of it probably is the news. But from our point of view, and with the growing number of these government-funded channels, I think what is behind a lot of these efforts is not so much propaganda, is that people really do need to see and understand what individual countries, what their viewpoints are on major issues that concerns not only their country, but global issues as well. So we're trying to put a lot of that on our news. It's not just, government propaganda. It's how it's Korea. It's Korea in terms of the news that we believe is important for Korea and for Koreans. It's also global issues that are important for Korea and Koreans. And it's a taste of what an outsider would see. Okay, this is what Koreans are looking at, are thinking about, are trying to resolve, both within Korea and outside of Korea. So I think it helps the global community understand each other better.
Yes, that's interesting. And in terms of the news, I understand that there's been a recent decision to go from about 9 live news shows per day to 12. What was the sort of background to this? Are you trying to, become, obviously maintaining all of the cultural aspects, but become more of a go-to place for news on Korea at the same time?
Yes, you've just hit it on the head. I mean, we do all of these other entertainment shows, but also we're doing it in part because there's no other place that non-Koreans can go to for Korean news. Well, we're trying to have it more regularly. I mean, at the top of the hour, every hour, some sort of news format, so that you can always, if you wanted to have the most recent news coming from Korea, you would know where to go to. So we're trying to do that. We're trying to sort of keep people informed about Korea on a day-to-day basis, on an hour-to-hour basis. I think that is also a very important function that we have to play as well. And so we're trying to keep both bowls rolling at the same time.
With the Koreans overseas now able to vote in elections, do you see Arirang as an important informant for these overseas Koreans to inform them about upcoming issues in the elections?
I think so. I think we're going to be a very important player in that. And it's not just because, we broadcast around the world. With the media, today, if you wanted to, if you're a Korean speaker, you could tap into any Korean media. I mean, you could get information about Korea politics every single day, every hour upon hour, every second upon second. But our approach is that we are we know that our audience is not as well informed about Korean politics day to day, and they wouldn't be normally interested about day to day politics all the time. But so that we can provide them with some basic information, get them more interested in what actually is going on within Korea. So our function is more as a stepping stone into what is going on into Korea. And I think that's what a lot of Koreans living outside of Korea need. They may not have known every day who the head of every party is and how they're making all these decisions on a daily basis, but they would feel that at some point, now that this opportunity has been given to them, that they need to take a closer look. And we provide a very basic and a very friendly way to get involved. So I think we'll try to play that role as best we can.
And how do you think the role of journalism and media as it evolves in Korea, how do you think that's influencing the Korean political scene, especially in light of the legislative and presidential elections we're seeing this year?
Korean journalism community has always played a very important part. Koreans in Korea, especially, but I'm pretty sure there are Koreans around the country, really do keep themselves informed, really do read the media, get involved, and participate in the media. So, media in Korea always has a very strong and important role to play in every election. And I think the two coming elections this year will be no exception.
Okay, so you served as the CNN Seoul Correspondent between I believe 95 and 2009. How do you think this experience helped you prepare for your current role as the president of Arirang?
I think it really taught me, because one of the things that I learned many things over at CNN, but one of the basic things about CNN is that you have to be able to turn news generating out of Korea into something that is understandable and would be of interest to non-Koreans. So in a way, that's exactly what our station is supposed to do. So in a way, it's trained me to really be able to take that, to really step out of Korea and step out of being a Korean and try to look at news from a non-Korean perspective. It's very hard. I mean, it's not an easy task. And even when I did it for such a long time, it was still hard. It's still very easy to sort of assume that other people know as much or as basically as much as you do about Korea. But if you continue to do that, that you leave a lot of people behind, that you can't take them on the journey to Korea because they won't have the basic roadmaps. So I think that's one thing that's come into play in a major way in the job that I'm doing now.
Did you find any surprises between the way Korea was perceived before and after the G20?
Well, I think as a Korean, and as normal Koreans, you're not really ever really prepared for how much Korea has come up in the world recently. We tend to be rather modest about where we are and how far we've grown and how far we've developed. So it was actually surprising to find that within the G20 that Korea had already garnered a certain role and had the respect and was considered shoulder to shoulder with the 20 top countries in the world. So that in itself was a new revelation for me. But also in going through the G20, I think this is the first time that Korea really had the role of really facilitating a lot of very difficult discussions and negotiations between these 20 countries. And I think even other countries were surprised that Korea was able to function and conduct this role so well. And let's not forget that English is not even Korea's first language. So many people in the G20 in Korea had to really translate everything back into Korean and be able to get the answers and negotiations and then translate everything back into English. So they lost twice more sleep than anyone else did when they were hosting the G20. But at the end of the day, I think everyone was pleasantly surprised, and Korea again gained a new respect in that they can play that leadership role. And I think that is going to continue, and I think that is maybe what is going to fuel a lot of Korea's even greater participation in a lot of global issues that are going to come in the future.
Just be interested to know what kind of approach you take with your coverage of the DPRK.
Well, with the DPRK in North Korea, our position is that we actually try to offer as much information about North Korea as possible. Because there's not a lot of channels that will really offer the amount of information that people actually will need or want, and it's more continuous. You know how when North Korea does something, everyone focuses on North Korea, and then of course when North Korea doesn't do anything, no one knows anything about North Korea. So it's a more continuous channel in which you can always find information about what North Korea is doing in terms of its, activities, policies. So we are trying to have a more a uniform type of general information going out to the world about North Korea.
Someone with a lot of experience working in Korea and covering these incidents as they arise, what do you think about AP's recent decision to open an office in Pyongyang? Do you think we're going to see more bureaus opening like this in future, or do you think it's still a difficult?
I think it's a great idea to have a bureau in Pyongyang. I think AP probably made the right decision, especially in terms of news judgment. Now, will they get a lot out of North Korea? I think that remains to be seen. But I think I've always thought that any type of outside contact that North Korea made, the more the better. And I think this might be a good one. I think it'll be difficult for both sides because it's a new type of contact. But we'll have to see how it goes. North Korea is still a difficult country to operate in, so we'll have to see how they do.
Now, journalism has always been between the intersection between media and politics. And in a changing world of information and communications with booming social media, do you think that traditional journalism is staying relevant?
For the time being. I mean, I've seen data, I've seen polls that talk about, how newspapers and print media will go out of, will disappear. I've seen how traditional TV will disappear. I've also seen polls 5-10 years ago that said that by now everything would have disappeared, and still, a few are still alive and kicking. A few. So, I think the trend is there. The timing, I'm still not quite sure of. But at the end of the day, I still believe that content will rule. And content is what a lot of journalists will still have to create. Although there's a lot of, one-person content and iPhones and everything, journalists, I want to believe that still, at the end of the day, there will be a different place for this kind of personal generated content and the content generated by journalists. And I think there's still a place for that. There's still a room for that. How long that will last is still.
And now, just to round off, I'd just like to pass you to my colleague, Miss O, just to ask you 2 or 3 final questions.
My name is Jungmin Julia-Oh. I'm intern in Korea Economic Institute. So my first question is, the March 8th was the observance of the annual International Women's Day. So as a public female figure in Korea, how do you think the role of women has evolved in Korea?
I think women have really taken on a much greater role in Korea than they have, and it's happened fairly recently. I think Korean women have always played a very, very important role. If you look at all the Korean historical dramas, look at all the mothers that have ruled Korean kingdoms for centuries. But they've always sort of played a more behind-the-scenes role. And I think a lot of Korean women are now coming out into the open and really joining the workforce and wanting to play a more front runner role. I think although they want to, they haven't quite gotten there yet. I think the number of Korean women are increasing in all the workplaces. They haven't been able to break that glass ceiling yet. But I see it coming very soon.
Okay. Including myself, there are a lot of Korean young women who wants to be more professional in the work field. What is your, short piece of advice for this young generation?
Well, it used to be in the old days that young women, if they wanted to be successful, they would say, "Oh, you have to go in and work harder than 3 times harder than your male counterpart." I think right now that's no longer true anymore. I think young women are just as aggressive, and especially in the workforce at a young age, they don't need to be. They already work a lot harder than their male counterparts. So it's almost a given now. But I think what they really do have to do is figure out that life is more than just about the workplace. I sometimes look at these young women who work so hard and are so aggressive, and I'm thinking, I mean, it's okay to relax. It's okay to enjoy yourself. It's okay to not have a career every time and think of your career every single moment of the day. But Korean women are very dedicated. When they want something and they go after something, you better get out of the way. But I just sometimes feel like just breathe a little bit, it's okay to not go as fast as everybody else. It's okay to go at your individual pace. It's okay not to go down the same road. I think a little bit more confidence in themselves would be beneficial to a lot of my younger generation.
Oh, that's great. I'll keep in my mind. Thank you.
So there you have it, our conversation with President Sohn Jie-Ae. If you'd like to find out more about Arirang, you can visit them at their website, which is located at arirang.co.kr. That's arirang.co.kr. Alternatively, you can follow President Sohn's tweets at Jie-Ae Sohn. That's Jie-Ae Sohn. Jie-Ae Sohn. I do hope you enjoyed today's podcast. You can download other episodes at our podcast website, which you can find at keia.podbean.com. That's keia.podbean.com. We'd also really appreciate if you could leave us some feedback using the comment system on either the Podbean website or directly on our iTunes page. If you'd like to suggest a candidate or topic for a future episode, be sure to drop me an email at ocarroll@keia.org. That's OCARROLL@keia.org. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you can join us next time.